And it's official. It said recording in progress, so it's official. We are recording now. Hey, Dave, good to see you. Nina, how are you? Good, good, good to see you guys. I'll let people in as we go. Just a reminder, we got about 2 hours slotted today. Well, about 90 minutes with Eric, unless we run out of questions or whatever, which I can't imagine. But if we do, we do. And then whoever wants to can just hang around after, and we'll kind of debrief, kind of go through how do we apply this to our businesses and all of those things. So as I'm multitasking here and adding new people, let me just a little bit about Eric. Um, and just a reminder too, for those of you who have like note takers, I do decline note takers in these meetings. So in case you're wondering about that, if you're trying to get your note taker in here, I don't let those in just because then who knows where it goes, right? It's kind of the Wild West with those things. But let me introduce Eric Koester, you guys. I would really say he's the brains behind my own book, which is how I met Eric. Him and his company Manuscripts ran me through the whole process. And actually, it was a first conversation with Eric. I don't even know if you remember this, but about 2 minutes into that conversation, when I was sort of deciding, do I want to write a book? What would I write it about? How does Manuscripts work? You asked me just kind of my story, and I'm like 2 minutes into that, you're like, it sounds like you're talking about doing the Unright Thing. And then
Yeah.
we both kind of got excited about that, and that's ultimately what became my book was Do the Unright Thing. It became part of my talks and all of that thing. So he's kind of the brains behind all of that. I wish I was as creative as he is. But so Eric is well, let's see, he's a writer, of course, and we want to talk about your writing as well. You are a teacher, which I knew you were a teacher of the year at Georgetown. I didn't realize you were the teacher of the year at Georgetown twice, and also
Twice.
like the entrepreneurship group's teacher of the year, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why, but they people think I'm okay at that, so we'll take it.
Well, it was the COVID year, so I assume nobody was teaching. So I assume that's
Nobody was really
why.
before COVID, so it was before COVID. So I get that, they rewarded me for pre-COVID work.
Okay, fair enough. You have a podcast, and also the main reason you are here is because you run and started a company called Manuscripts, which you
Yep.
refer to as a book writing community, which it really is. So that's
Yep.
a little bit about who Eric is. So the way that this will work today, if you guys have questions, just jump in, ask questions. As you all know, I got plenty to keep us going the whole 90 minutes. That's not a problem. But if you have questions, feel free to jump in. It's kind of a rare opportunity. I know the topic of book writing comes up a lot with us speakers, like how do we do it? How do we leverage it? How do we put it as part of our business model? What should we expect? All of those things. And I know some of the folks on here have written books, some haven't. So that's kind of the lay of the land. But maybe just to start, Eric, why don't you? I gave you a few resume items, but why don't you kind of introduce yourself and talk a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and how you found this
Yeah.
journey?
I appreciate it. Well, thank you. I'm really Steve's hype man is basically the only reason I'm here. So just a lot of that is what I'm here for. But no, thank you very much, Steve, for having me. And I still very fondly remember our very first conversation and multiple conversations along the way. So I'll just sort of give you the kind of crazy backstory of how I got here a little bit that may help give context for it a bit. So I actually wrote my first book when I was in my 20s. And it was a very transformative experience for me. It was funny. Like as soon as I sort of published that book, all these things started to happen to me, and I kind of didn't really fully understand why. But it really helped me understand that like there was something powerful about it in my life. So I didn't really think a lot about it, but I basically wrote this book and suddenly founded a Silicon Valley company with Ashton Kutcher as my investor. All this stuff happened. I got on boards and these things. And so about 10 years later, after that book had come out and I'd written another one, I was teaching at Georgetown. And so again, like I wasn't smart enough to get into Georgetown as an undergrad. So the fact that they invited me to teach there was like bizarre to me to begin with. But I had this interesting opportunity. And so I was teaching MBAs and undergrads about sort of starting companies. And I enjoyed it. I really, really loved the experience. It was fun to get to do. But after about 2 years of doing it, I got a little bit like burnt out. And the reason is I was helping all these kids talk about how to learn how to start companies, and yet almost none of them were starting companies. And so the true story between us friends here is I quit. I went to Georgetown and said, hey, listen, like I love you guys. I've got a venture capital firm to run. I got a lot of stuff I'm doing here. This ain't like my thing. And they were like, cool. No. I was like, no, what do you mean no? They're like, well, we've already slotted you to teach for the year. You have to teach. We don't have anyone to backfill. And so I was like, well, that sucks. And they're like, well, that's the deal. And so I was sort of miffed about it. And so I was sort of complaining about this, to whoever would sort of listen, just like kind of that offhanded thing. And I was talking to one of my best friends, a guy named Shane Mack, and I said to Shane, I was like, hey, I'm really, this thing behind it, whatever. And he's like, dude, like you're an entrepreneur. Like if you're frustrated with the class, like fix it, do something different. And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, why don't you do something that would matter then? And I was like, okay. And so he asks me very point blank, so what would you want to do if you wanted to basically help these kids change their lives? What would you do? And I immediately said, I would just make them all write a book. And he goes, then make them all write a book. And I was like, well, that's the stupidest idea ever. And in the wise words of Steve Fredlund, I did the Unright Thing. So I had literally 2 weeks before the class about to start. I had never taught anyone to write books. I had no idea what I was doing behind it. I literally took my syllabus on how to start a company, and I took the word startup and replaced every instance with book. And that was my syllabus. I walked into class on that first day and I said, all right, this is going to sound a little weird, but all of you this semester, there's only one thing that's going to matter for your grade. And I flashed up the slide behind me and it said, write a book. And I'll tell you, like, I vividly remember their faces. It was like, it literally looked like a combination of I kicked their dog and they were also like angry at like me as a, I mean, it's just this terrible thing. And so I remember like very much like, okay, and I'm trying to explain like, here's why this makes sense. And this is an entrepreneurship class and it's going to make sense to you behind it. And so I did this whole song and dance for like a couple minutes. And I literally then I had this like kind of realization. I was like, I think I'm connecting with them. I'm like looking at them and they're like kind of starting to like, I'm seeing smiles on their faces and I see them start to like do their phones. I'm thinking like, they're getting it. They're vibing into it. A couple months later, I asked one of them what was going on and they said, oh, well, we basically all started a group chat and we were all figuring out how many days we had to drop the class. And so like it was not going well, right? Like this is not thing that they wanted to do. And so at the end of the class, I basically told them like, hey, listen, this sounds ridiculous. I get it. I'm just going to tell you, like, if you decide you want me to help you write a book, you want to do this thing, I'm happy to help you do it. And if you don't, just don't tell the dean. Right? So that was my message to them. So I left the class that night. I told my wife and I was like, listen, this sounds ridiculous. And she's like, why would you do that? You're an idiot. And I was like, I know, but I had to figure a try. So the next week I'm coming to class, right? And so I'm late. I have a job, right? I'm coming to class. I'm running there late. I get there about 2 minutes after the class has started. And so I get to my class and I walk up to the classroom and standing outside of the classroom are like people. They're all standing outside the class, like waiting outside of it. And I think to myself, fuck, sorry, can I cuss here? Sorry, I said it. But,
Yeah. Well, no, you
okay.
can't. No,
I can't,
no, you
but
can't. You can't.
okay. I said, fuck, like what has happened here? Like I'm in trouble. And so I like kind of like wade through all the people that are there. And there's not enough desks, everyone's standing. And I walk into class and I realize the class had actually tripled in size over the last week. What had happened is that all these people had started telling their friends. And suddenly in the course of a week, this went from a class that I was going to drop, that the people were going to drop into one of the most popular classes on campus. And in that instance, I realized two very important things. Number one, people actually want to do hard things. They want to do things that matter, things that are meaningful. They care about something that actually is important to them. And number two, they don't want to do it alone. So that really was what happened. And those two things were really at the centerpiece. And so what sort of happened from there is this crazy journey that I find myself on is that suddenly this thing took off a life of its own. Like, how is this person helping people write books? And like, students started winning awards and giving TED Talks and launching companies. All this stuff started happening. And then everyone and their mother kept coming up to me saying, hey, can I sit in your class? And I was like, this ain't how this works. This is a class. And so about 5 years ago, we spun this thing out from Georgetown into
Hey,
a
Eric,
community.
real quick. What year
Yeah.
when did you start it? Sorry, I just want to get that. When did,
2017. Yeah,
okay, thanks.
2017. So it's a
Yep.
little less, so 8 years ago, I guess, or so, is when I first started the class.
Yep. Okay.
About 5 years ago, and around like 2000 or so, we decided to spin it out into a B corporation. So we're a social venture community. That's sort of how I met Steve. We now run these communities a couple times a year, and our real focus is on that idea. So we focus on really helping a specific type of person. So we work with people who we call modern authors. And it's not every person, but modern authors are people who want to, they want to own their book. Like we focus exclusively on making sure that you own 100% of your book. So that was a key requirement Georgetown had. You can do this, but the students have to own their work and it can't just be for the rich kids. So the model we built is around that. Number one, every author in our community owns 100% of their work. Number two, we help authors build a community around their book. We know that's really important, so we help them build that community. Number three, they use modern coaching and tools. And number four, we help them maximize economic opportunities. So think about what they want their book to do for them. So that's really how it has come to be. Wild enough, like we now have about 3,000 alums. So all the books behind you, what Steve, I think yours is about right there in it. But I've helped about 3,000 authors. We have about 550 national award winners and finalists from it. And it really has that big core of, our focus is exclusively, helping people do hard things, right? That's really what we believe in. And we also believe in that philosophy of never write alone. So that really has become what this is. Like I said, we do these communities a couple times a year. It's usually about 30, 40 people behind it. And our approach is very simple and straightforward. Like we've really learned that doing hard things requires accountability. So a lot of it is peer accountability and kind of like professional accountability. But also, I think the biggest piece that I may really, really have realized more than anything is I think that what is hard for books, and for those of you who know this, is that people really struggle to sort of sell a book today. And so our philosophy really is quite different in what we believe, and that is the worst thing you can do is try to sell a book. The more important thing you can do is try to make people belong to your book. So that's kind of what has happened here. I'm happy to talk more about that in terms of the philosophy of how and why authors books struggle and why they succeed today. But that's really how we got here. And like I said, I'm still surprised that Georgetown lets me teach. I have politely been fired from 4 different departments at Georgetown for teaching this, candidly. And I'll tell you the true story is that once people started to see this and faculty members started to see like, hey, how come students are publishing and I am struggling to get my work published? The old ego problem became very, very big one. And so I've been politely shuffled out of 4 different departments at Georgetown, all the way up to the provost on these things. And it's funny, but like that really is the core of it. But I love it. It's really, really powerful for me. I myself have written books, both, nonfiction and I've even written fiction now. But the whole process is do hard things that matter and don't do them alone is kind of the core to my whole life philosophy and specifically how I think about books.
Whew, whew, I gotta catch my
There
breath,
you
man.
go.
That's so good. So good. And I know I love it. As a reminder, feel free to jump in with questions or whatever. But so is it still offered as like an entrepreneurial class, or is it shifted to be more like it's a book writing class?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's actually it has always stayed as an entrepreneurship class. What shifted into it is that more and more people started coming in outside of entrepreneurship. I think and it's a great question, Stephen. A kind of an interesting insight is, people often ask, so we've now become like one of the top 15 global publishers in the world by volume. Like this is nuts, right? Like this is not supposed to happen. I know nothing about publishing. I have no experience in it. I don't know any of those things, right? So how does that happen? And the reason it actually happens is because we believe that most people treat their book like art, right? And that's why they fail, because they treat it like a piece of art. We believe you should treat it like a business venture and you should think of it in that way. And so the most important thing that I think to building a great book today is building it in the way that you would build the next great startup. It's yours. And so a lot of that really comes down to the fact that you iterate, you get feedback along the way. So that idea of iteration is really, really key in the world of entrepreneurship. That is a big part of it. Number two, you really focus on building what we call early adopters, who are your fans and your people so they can spread it for you. And number three, you give a darn about the business model, right? And I think that's part of what I think is challenging. And that's why I think it's both very, very odd that a book writing class is in entrepreneurship, and it makes absolute perfect sense, right? Those two things. And I think that's kind of what we realize when we think about modern authors. And this is, especially for this community, quite apt. What I will tell you we've learned about books, and the reason I think people sometimes have mixed relationships with them is books themselves are not a great business model, right? It is a shitload of work to sell a product for 15 bucks and get $2 or $3 from it. It is just not a great business model. However, it's a really, really great leverage tool. So if you flip the entire thing around and stop thinking about it as your product, but instead you think about your book as the hook, your persona is the system, and your business model is how you get paid, the book will be one of the most valuable assets that people can create for themselves. Like what our research has found about today's nonfiction writers, the ones that we kind of work with, is there was a study that was put out, and the average author was producing about $186,000 of value from their book. Now, only 5% of that came from book sales, but it came from speaking, coaching, workshops, training in those ways. So you have to think about it as a leverage tool. But the problem is that the metrics of success for books is how many books have I sold? And so that's really when we talked about entrepreneurship land is the book is not the business model, right? That's not it. It's basically the hook. It's the marketing engine, and your business model is actually what really drives that one. So if you flip around the business model side of it, and why I think the MBA class that I teach on this one is so fascinating is it actually illustrates that McDonald's business model is not burgers. Just so you know, they break even on burgers, but the burgers are what get you in the door to buy the fries and the milkshake and all the other shit that you actually spend money on, the real estate that they get money on. So there's a cleverness to that one. But I think a lot of the hard part about books is that people think of them as books are about selling books. And the reality is, books are about much more if you treat it in the right way as a modern author.
That's so good. You mentioned the community element. I think one of the, I was part of your whole process. So part of the value obviously is the step-by-step writing of the book, and you bring in all the editors and all the different people that I would never be able to, figure out how to bring them in. But you
Yeah.
mentioned that the community side of it, creating owners too. That changed the whole dynamic of everything. This idea of
Yeah.
creating an ownership group, a community of kind of your author community and those sort of things, and going through it together. And my wife said I actually had the book launch. We followed all the protocol and had way more people show up than I thought there would be. And my wife referred to that as the best day of my life. And it actually
Wow.
was. Like it really
That's
was
cool.
because I had somebody there sort of emceeing it. And he said, his words were, not many of us actually get to see a preview of our funeral. And I was like, where is this going? But it was actually quite beautiful because it was true. Like these are all the people from all the different things I've been involved with that would show up at my funeral, I hope. So it
Yep.
was this great, just beautiful, exciting moment. But it wasn't just about releasing the book. It was about the
Yeah.
momentum and the ownership and the community that was created
Yep.
in that. So just a little, I don't know where I was going with that. I don't have a
No,
question,
no.
but
Well,
just
I'll actually pick
confirm
that up a
that.
little bit for you because I think
Yeah,
it's
please.
actually a really important thing. And I think, especially for this group here who's thinking about, how to really think about a book in terms of success today behind it. I think the other thing that people miss on when they think about a book, and really, a book is not the only thing that this can be applied to, right? Like these are similar things you can do if you host an event, right? You can think about that way. If you host a conference, if you do like, there's a bunch of different sort of like types of projects like a book. I just happen to love books because I write, but I think the big thing that people miss on a lot in having and building a successful sort of like momentum behind anything is exactly what Steve points at is you really want to focus on the fact that having about 200 people involved in anything, not as a buyer, but as a fan, is transformative. So if you want to know anything about like what my philosophy is on really building successful knowledge businesses today, is you have to go back to the work of called the true fan theory. So a guy named Kevin Kelly wrote about the true fan theory, and I think for all of us living in the internet age and the AI age or whatever it is, the real thing that Kevin Kelly's hit on is success today is not driven by individuals. It's driven by a small number of fans, and the internet just gives you a unique way to assemble those fans in ways that you didn't have before. So Steve talks about building this community, and part of the going back to this question. So people oftentimes would come up to me and say like, Eric, this is nuts. Like you have 19-year-old kids who are like outselling professional authors like left and right? Like it's a crazy thing, right? How do you do these ones? Because they don't have the advantages of being wizened and old and rich, right? They don't have those things, right? They're 19-year-old kids, right? And so I have all these people who've had these things that have happened to them where, our typical author is in the top 0.1% of sales. And these were like, again, these are kids, right? These are not us, right? So how does that happen? Well, and so the real thing that people don't understand is how momentum happens today, especially with a book, but really with anything. So to Steve's point, one of the things that I really encourage Steve and really all our authors to do is understand the fact that it's not about selling copies of the book, especially early on. It's about creating word of mouth to have people sell it for you. So if Steve were to go out and try to sell 1,000 copies of the book, he's one person. It's just hard. That's 1,000 sales Steve has to make. It's a lot easier if Steve can get 200 people and get all of them to sell 3 to 5 for him. So that's really the idea of how you create leverage with the book. And so what our learning and research came from is what we forced all of these 20 somethings to do is get about 200 people involved in their book as a fan. And so the way that you do that is you have to get them involved before the book's done. So number one, you have to pre-sell the book. Number two, you have to not just get them to buy the book, but to get to be part of the book. And so part of what we oftentimes encourage authors to do is sell tickets to their launch event or get people to book you to speak or do whatever it is, some way that they become invested in it. And then number three, you need to let them have a say. They get to vote on your covers, they get to do things. And so what's crazy that we learned, and this is why people couldn't understand it, but we don't ask people to spend money on marketing and we didn't ask these kids to invest in a PR firm or whatever it is. What we did though is we created a fan base for them. So 200 people, what we figured out here is essentially on average, those 200 people that get involved in a book before it's done, they will tell 3 to 5 more people each. So if you do the math on that one, it's not that impossible to get 200 people to be part of something. It's hard to get 1,000, right? I mean, most books never reach 1,000. It's just like 99% of books will sell less than 1,000. 99.9% of books will sell less than 1,000, right? And the reason is because it's hard, right? But if you can get 200 people and you turn them into leverage for you, then it's a lot easier. And so that's really the big secret of it today is I think that people focus on like, I will get book sales versus fans. And I think that's kind of what's interesting to know about it is if I were to tell anyone anything, the biggest thing to do is write a great draft. And number two, start getting people involved in it as beta readers, as fans, as cover reader, whatever that stuff is. And then the crazy part behind it is they have a high give a shit score, right? They came to Steve's event because he made them feel part of something. And then what's crazy is I bet you could trace back, deals you've gotten and clients and speaking, all that stuff that comes back from those people because they now have a high give a shit score. And that's what I think people miss is what we've learned is once a book is out, it just loses all that word of mouth. The average person, even if they love it, won't tell people. But if you get them involved early, their give a shit level is very, very high.
Yeah, you mentioned those things. Yeah, I mean they absolutely love to be voting on covers, voting on colors. Part of that was they got to be in the acknowledgments of the book, and for
Yep.
some people that was I don't need to be. Some people that was oh that's awesome and all
Yeah.
those things. But yeah, it's the ownership thing. And so I mean you talked about I mean there's so many different ways we could go with these questions here, but like as you're talking to a bunch of speakers here too, and you're obviously you speak about entrepreneurship, the book writing you've turned into an entrepreneurial endeavor. What are some of the other similarities you see, or any of the similarities you see between your process of coaching people to write this book to the speaking industry? Like what are some of
Yeah.
the nuggets that you can pull out of what you've learned or what you teach that could apply to us? Because most of us are solopreneurs. We just have some part-time help, here and there sometimes. Like what
Yep.
have you learned that can actually help us in the rest of our
Yeah.
business?
It's a great question. And I think and part of what I'll tell you a little bit is I think what I think is really important to understand in any kind of, knowledge business today, especially if you're not like a big famous brand, is the secret of success really comes down to how can you scale beyond yourself without having other people, right? How do you do that one? And so I think like what's really interesting in this kind of insight about speaking. So I spend a lot of time trying to understand different types of authors. So just to take one step back a little bit to get into the answer for you is we actually look at modern authors and we really have identified 7 different personas. So there's 7 different types of modern authors today. We have the coach author, we have the consultant author, we call them the builder author, we have the speaker author, we have the educator author, which is me. So there's different kind of personas. And the important thing to know is those personas are driven by different models, right? Their business model. So again, if your model is to get paid consulting, that's a different model than if you want to get paid speaking. It's just there's a different primary model. So the first thing to understand is what that is. And so not everyone is the same. So if you're getting advice on how to make a book help you with consulting, that's not that relevant to you. The speaking part is. So what we found is that speakers generally speaking at the highest of levels they have books, right? That's the first thing to know is they typically do have books. And the reason for that actually that we learned is because it's not the fact that you have a book for their audience. People think that they're like, oh well, I want to have a book so that they can give it to their audience. That is sometimes happens, but the bigger reason why that speakers have books is because it actually lowers the risk of you sucking.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is part of what the challenge here is a little bit behind it is that like, so much is dependent on you as a person, speaker, your speaker reel behind it. And so what many of the people that we found that were, bookers of conferences, they're bookers of like that behind it, they actually read the book and read it to understand, are you a good thinker? So do you think, or are you just charismatic and entertaining in that way? So the book is actually the biggest thing that I would sort of say is important if you want to send something out that's not just your business card or your speaker reel. It actually shows that you have depth into your message and your thinking behind it. And the reason this really matters is that for speakers, yes, you are certainly selling like entertaining on stage, being and stuff like that behind it. But really what you're trying to help sell is value in the conference, right? Value of it. So when they walk away from Steve's keynote, they want to be able to go home and say, hey, here's what I learned from it. This was worth $1,500 because I learned this new thing about courage, or I learned this thing about innovation or what might have you. So a lot of what they're trying to do is make sure that you're not just charismatic, but you're also add value that your attendees can go forward. So that's kind of the first thing of why books matters. It's not just for the attendees to like get the book. It's because really they want to make sure that you deliver value in that way. And in general, afterwards, they may go buy your book anyways, or what might have you. The second thing that I think is really important to know about the speaking business and the speaking market behind it that I think is important to know is a lot of what happens in this market, as you all know well, is word of mouth. Right? Word of mouth is really, really critical. And so the word of mouth is really less from audience person to non-audience person, or to audience person, but it's really the booker or the, whoever is the host of the organization, whatever it is, to other people. And so oftentimes what happens there is if they want to refer Steve to their friend who books for the Automobile Association of Iowa, right? It's difficult for them to do that one. And so instead they'll say, hey, listen, Steve's great. Pick up his book. You'll see what I mean. He's awesome. Because it's not enough depth for them to believe in you just by watching your speaking reel in that way or watching you speak. So it really becomes a word of mouth engine. So the way that I oftentimes tell speakers to think about their book as an asset is number one, the key thing you have to think about is generally speaking what it is. It's a 3-year asset for you. So you have to think about it as a 3-year asset. Every 3 years, you essentially will likely need a new book if you want to keep up with the typical speaker circuit market. That's what it is. And the reason for that is you want to basically be able to go to every person you know and say to them, hey, I have a new book coming out. I'd love to come back or I'd love to come and talk about it here. So that gives you something fresh so that now you can go back and activate your people that you already know. Number two, once you do that and you have those people behind it, once they've heard your new spiel, then they can refer you for the next 2 years and then you start the cycle all over again. But the big thing that I would say if you want to really do this well is the key part behind it is don't wait for the book to be done, but instead get to a point where you have a draft, you have a couple chapters of it, and start to send that out early so that they can book you for next year. Right. So the key thing you have to do if you want to use and leverage a book for an asset is number one, put it on your LinkedIn bio as soon as you start it and you're serious about it, right? So you should have it on your bio coming 2026, right? If you're doing a new book. And number two, as soon as you have the introduction, a solid dialed in introduction, not the whole book, but just the introduction, and you have some details like this is the publisher name or this is when it's going to come out behind it. You have those two things, like here's the introduction and here's kind of a rough timeline when it's coming out. You send it out to all those people and you say, hey, I got a new book coming out. I'd love to get your feedback on it. You're not asking to speak yet, but you're telling them I'd love to get your feedback on it. You want to get them bought into the idea and the concept behind it. And then they'll be like, hey, I really like it or I really hate it or whatever it is behind it. Then you just say, great, thank you for the feedback. And then once you have more certainty, you come back to them again and you kind of stay top of mind so that now you have this. So that's, I think, the biggest secret of this idea of really the core part of building fans is you want to build fans who are bookers, who are people who can book you for that one. And the way you build a fan is not by being transactional. Right. The challenge that I think people have with thinking about booking things or, selling things is they're transactional. That is not what fans want. Taylor Swift's fans are not there just for the concert. They're there for the whole damn show. And so for you, if you want to get a booker to be a fan, you have to bring them on the whole show. And that's the core part of it. They need to be involved in your new book from the very moment you have an introduction, the very moment that you wind up having the first draft of it, the very moment that you launch your pre-sale campaign and all that stuff along the way, so that now they have a much higher give a shit level, right? They care. And at that point, then they're more likely to book you at some point in the next 3 years. So that's, I think, how to strategically think about books
Mhm.
is the same way that we think about building a community for your book is I think if you're doing the speaker market, You just have a different type of community you want to build. And you just want to basically remember that you're building a year-long relationship so they feel part of the development of it. And that is really what helps people do those things. There's a guy named Greg Offner who I think you probably know, Steve,
Mhm.
but he shared with me this same sort of thing. He said the way that I think about it now after the first book, and so he never when we wrote one together. He's signed by a speaker bureau, but he said I realized that I need the book gives me 2 years. The year I'm building it and the first year it's out. And then at year two, I'm basically starting a new keynote that's sort of a derivation on themes or something like that behind it. And then in year three, I'm starting the next book again, and I have 2 more years. So that's kind of his cycle as a professional speaker is I have 2 years for the book. The first year that it's being developed and the second year that it's out, and then I have a transition year, and then I have the new book in a 2 year cycle. So that's his thought process behind it. And I think it's actually like fairly common when I talk to speakers in that way of they're using this as a way to stay refreshed and so that they can go back to the same people they have and then also have them refer them to upcoming events and things in that way.
I like that. Yeah, and I don't know if it was you that told me or somebody else that told me, but it's consistent with what you said is that once you have a book, yeah, it's less risky that you suck, but they also event planners tend to see you more as a thought leader
That's right.
than maybe as the fear of you're a consultant who's going on stage to sell. There's just sort of
Mhm.
something psychological about the fact that they think, oh, they're a thought leader, whether they read the book or not, whether it has
Yeah.
anything directly tied to your content or not. There's something about that psychology. Was that you'd agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think also part of it as well is that in their mind, they have an easier way to market you as well, right? Like that's what's
Hmm.
also neat too. Because when they're trying to think about marketing of you, it's like the reason that books actually matter in terms of from a not just a psychological standpoint, but in terms of a value standpoint, is the gap of books to sort of the desire to write a book and the actual completion of it is very high. So like part of the reason that, and again, this is a perception game to your point about psychology. The reason that if you would compare the perception that an audience would have of you, and they would compare someone who's an author to someone who's a CEO or an
Hmm.
executive, whatever. Think of it someone at a C-suite level. The interesting, if you ask their perception of them, just like who do you think is more of a thought leader, they would pick the author. Right. Even though it may be a lot harder, like realistically, to become a CEO of a Fortune 500 company or an executive into it. Here's the reason why is because they actually have never tried, for the most part, to do a CEO. So they don't know. But the thing about books is 81% of ambitious people have write a book on their bucket list. So it's a very common thing that people want to do. And yet it's also one of the most difficult thing that smart people try to do and fail at. So 98 to 99% of people that start a book will never finish it. So that gap, 81% to basically 1%, right? That gap right there is the prestige gap. So people perceive like it's something that I wish a lot of people wish they could do, but they can't do. And so to you, they perceive you, Steve, as like, wow, you did something that 99% of people that even I couldn't do. And so they perceive you as being able to do hard things, both in the audience and on stage. And so the perception of it is that you are grittier, harder working, all that kind of stuff behind it. So that is now the book can't suck, right? That's the other part of it. Like you just can't write a sucky book because they'll see right through it. But so long as your book is, good, strong, all that kind of stuff, it will play those things. But it is a perception of like terms of the I want to do this and it's really, really hard to do is why it has a high signal in the market today.
That is super interesting. Catherine, why don't you go ahead?
Thanks. This has been really interesting to hear you chat about it, Eric. Thank you.
Mhm.
I wanted to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, using, sending out the intro to event planners, things like that, to invite them in early on the journey. Is this like cold outreach, or are these to event planners that you've already communicated with before? Like, would it be weird if it's someone that you would love to connect with, but you haven't connected with them for just be like, oh, here, read my intro. You don't know me, but
Yeah, I mean, so I think, I don't think there's any such thing as cold outreach. I think that what I would share to everyone is I think a big part of what you want to do is you want to make all outreach warm. So that is my first. So certainly, if you know someone, it's a lot easier to do this one. But I think it's much more effective for people to warm people, even if you know them, rather than it is to just focus on people you already know. So I'll tell you how I think about this and how I teach people to do it quite well. So remember, a lot of what I'm trying to do, or my origins of this, is I'm working with people who have no network. right? Who have no access, who have no speaker connections and that kind of stuff behind it. So how do I get 19-year-old kids to be able to get booked at conferences and speaker bureaus, stuff like that behind it? By appropriately understanding the science of warming. So again, I'm going to say it up front here. There's no such thing as cold relationships. There's just relationships you haven't warmed yet, right? So I would never reach out to someone cold, ever, ever, ever. I would never recommend anyone doing that one. Why? Just success sucks, right? Like cold emails, less than like 0.1% of people respond. So you're much more likely to benefit from a warming process and making it a warm outreach as opposed to reaching cold and having to spray and pray, especially in your industry. There's just not that many people that are bookers, right? So you don't want to like burn out people by being a spam cannon. So what I would tell you, what we learned of how you actually turn cold relationships into warm ones very quickly is the following play on reciprocity. So the simplest thing that I would encourage you to do is find the big list of people you want. So step one is build a big list of people who you want to engage with. So if you're trying to basically, get more gigs booked, find out all of the conferences you want to speak at and who are the people who book for it. So build a big list. Hire an EA, go on Upwork, whatever. Find someone who can do that list for you, number one. Number two, the second step in this one is how you build a reciprocity engine. So the key thing to understand this one is if you read the book by Adam Grant, Give and Take, you'll understand the power of reciprocity. And so the secret of, again, making cold relationships warm is by making people feel an onus to help you, to do you a favor. Now, how do you do that with a cold relationship? Well, the first thing that you have to do is you basically have to engage them in a way that actually makes them feel special, not cold. So what I always teach people to do is the first thing in taking a cold relationship and making it warm, let's just use the conference example. Let's say that you identify, 15 different conferences and organizers you would love to book, right? That you would love to book with. Build that list. And step one is to follow all of them on LinkedIn or whatever platform they seem to be posting. Number one, do that. Number two, go in casually, not like a stalker, and go in and like and comment on 2 or 3 of their posts. So engage them in that way. Real, authentic things. Again, do not use AI to do this. This is a human thing behind it. Number 3, once you've done that one, wait a few days and send them a DM. Hey, listen, or a connection message. Hey, I saw a couple of your posts. Really, really like this stuff you're working on. Just wanted to connect and introduce myself. Don't ask for anything yet. All right, do that thing. Now, once they've connected, now here's where the secret comes in. Now, the biggest thing that you can do next is actually what we call the 5-minute favor. And so this is key. You want to take those people who engage with you. Again, you've got it's still a cold relationship largely, but now you're at least a cold connection. And now what you do is you do something that takes you 5 minutes or less, but actually is expressing generosity. So the way you have to do this one is you have to take something that they have clearly put time into. They themselves have written a long article already, or they themselves have put up a video that's really good, or they themselves have a charity they're supporting, whatever it is. Find something that they have a give a shit about, right? Number one. And number two, celebrate them. Post it on your social media. Hey, I just saw something, really great stuff, or, put it out there, comment on it, do whatever it is, but do something nice for someone else's stuff. Again, you don't want to like make this a transactional thing, but you want to authentically do something nice behind it, whatever this thing is. Really, really like this stuff behind it. And then you reconnect back with them and say, hey, listen, I love your stuff behind it. Hey, I'm working on this new book. I love the stuff you're posting. I'd love to sort of see if there's at some point, I could share it with you, get your comment onto it in that way, whatever it is in that sense. Now, I will tell you what you've just done there is you flipped the entire curve. Because what we did is when we taught people to do this, these are 21-year-old kids behind this, is that we asked them to do cold outreach first. So we had them do cold outreach to people they wanted to connect with, get jobs and stuff like that. In general, as college kids, they had about a 3% connection rate. 3% of people would actually be willing to like connect with them and get on the phone just from cold emails. When we did this exercise, 40% of the people would be willing to talk to them. 40%. And it holds whether they were people who were in their 20s or 30s or beyond that one behind it. So it's a terrific question, I think, that Catherine asked about this idea of like, is they just cold or warm people? And I would just, again, go back to you in this case is I really think that especially if you have a book and you have a book that's coming out, that is an opportunity to cultivate cold relationship to make them warm. And so by using it in the right ways, the smart ways, and using generosity in that way, people will be surprisingly open to help you. But I would tell you, like, it's not about being warm or cold. I think it's about making them warm, even if they're sort of modestly warm already.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Eric.
Is that helpful? Does that make sense a little?
Yeah, yeah, it
Okay.
does.
Yeah. Perfect.
Shifting gears a little bit. I know Dave had to pop off. We got a couple people popping on, popping off. That's just kind of how this works. But Rob and Elizabeth
Sure.
both mentioned in the chat that they've got books and they're kind of in the process of writing another one or releasing another one or thinking about another one. But what advice would you have for folks? Obviously, as we're planning our next book, there's great wisdom here and developing community and building ownership and all those different things. What about the folks that, I have a book out there, maybe it's a year or two, 3 years old, maybe longer. I'd love to, re-energize it, or I'd love to maximize it or optimize it in the context of a speaking business. What advice would you have in that situation?
Yeah, and the first thing I'll just tell you is I think after about 3 years, the book is just done. You got to move on, and it's iced, right? It's like it's just sort of. I mean, unless your book is super famous, like Simon Sinek is still talking about start with why, but for the most part, you kind of at a certain point where you know it's just done, right? That's sort of what I would tell you behind it. And I wish I could give you some other kind of magical advanced answer to that one behind it, but if it sort of hasn't really broken, you kind of can't do a whole lot at that point. But I will tell you, I think there are a few things that you could certainly do to, revitalize and put life into a book to get it to go bigger and more ways behind it. I think the first thing that I would sort of say is I think a big part of it is to remember that there are multiple mediums in a book. And so I think, typically one of the things that we've encouraged authors to do is engage in what we call an extended launch of their book. And so one of the challenges that people do when they launch a book is oftentimes they try to launch everything on one day, right? I'm going to put up my ebook and my Spanish edition and my hardcover, my paperback and my audiobook all in one day. And they believe that that concentrated launch really matters. What we really want to encourage modern authors to do is spread their book out as long as possible. So in general, what we would teach someone to do is start on day one of launching their ebook, and then 30 days later launch their paperback, and then 90 days later launch their hardcover, and then do their audiobook. So the first thing I would tell you is if you have not launched all those mediums, there's an opportunity for you there, right? To relaunch in those things. And the biggest thing I would say in that sense is remember that you have to launch each one of these things as if it's the first launch. You have to spend, 6 weeks beforehand hyping it up, engaging people, getting content. You want to host something live so you can get content from the actual launch of it. And then you want to just share the stuff live afterward. So that's a big part of what I would sort of say to people is, the book itself, there's not just a book, there's all the mediums of the book to launch into it. So I think that's the first thing is like use all those mediums. And what I always encourage people to do when they're planning out their book or planning out extensions of the book, to think about what can you launch related to your book every 90 days. And so that's part one. Part two is I think there's also natural extensions that can come from a book. So if, for example, you wanted to turn this into, a mini course or something like that behind it. So, Steve, if you wanted to go out and put together the mini course that you developed or the workbook to do the Unright Thing, perfect. Like it's a great thing. Put together a 15-page workbook that you put together and launch it just in that way, right? Like the idea of putting it out in that sense. So that's a lot of what I think about from a way to extend it is I think to remember that if you're just focusing on the book and the book sales, you're missing the point, which is the book is the hook. Right? Remember, the book is the hook. So every chance you can get to hook more people into your ecosystem, the better. And so whether that's part of the hook is the ebook, the paperback, the hardcover, the workshop, the workbook, like all that kind of stuff are the keys to build and extend your hookability. This is a weird word to say, but your hookability of this thing is important there. And so I think that's what I would say. If I were, again, giving people advice on, hey, I have a new book. I think someone just said their book came out this week, which is 2 days ago. So Rob said that one.
Yeah.
My advice to you is I would stop right now and I would look and say, how can I, over the next 18 months, every single quarter, have a substantive launch related to the book? Right. And it's different mediums of it. It's different derivatives of it. But that means 4 weeks of prep for the launch, like hyping people up for it, a week of the launch where you have some kind of a live thing where you have that one, and then 2 weeks of talking about what happened in that one. That gives you literally like 6 to 7 weeks of content every quarter, just focusing on the book and that sense and that way behind it. So that's how I would tell you to think about it a little bit, is to remember that like the book is simply the hook. And so when you're not focusing on just sales of it, but you're looking at it as a chance to hook more people along the way, you'll win. And even like if you're looking to use it as a way to get on more stages or whatever it is, if you do an audiobook, and let's just say that you haven't done the audiobook yet. So let's just say that you want to, the key thing I would sort of say is like, you can use that as a new launch. Hey, my audiobook came out and I was able to get Joe Schmo to do the forward of it or whatever it is. Awesome. That is a new thing you can launch. But I would tell you, going back to Rob's point, please do not do that tomorrow. right? You've got like 90 days to focus on the current one and do all this stuff and like have a launch event and invite people in that kind of way. So just be patient and that will help you turn this into it. Like again, asset, the book it's a work, right? It certainly is a lot of work to do it. But if you do a book the right way today as a modern author and you own it and control, you should be able to turn it into 24 months of substantive launch events, like substantive things. And that's really how I would say to think about maximizing it is 4 weeks, a week, 4 weeks to prep, promote the launch, a week of actually like kind of doing the launch and, getting a live event, and then 2 weeks of talking about it afterwards. That will make it really valuable.
It's so good. And I see, Nina, we'll get to you in one second. I saw Ari put her book and she wants to do the audio book this year. And same thing, that's the one piece I haven't done yet either. I'm kind of waiting to do that relaunch thing. And like Ari, people keep asking, we need to hear you talk about throwing up into your trombone in your voice. Like, I can read it, but I need to hear you talking about that. So I think
Yep.
people, but yeah, I mean, it's a whole new launch and a whole new opportunity there to do that. Go ahead, Nina.
Okay, great. This has been really wonderful. First, Eric, what is in the background behind you with the light? I've just got to know.
Oh, and the light. Most of these are all books. I mean, that is I think it's from India. We visit India. That is like an elephant head sort of Indian thing there. So, and then up here, I don't know if you can see it, but they have the 9 3/4 platform from Harry Potter.
Yes.
So, Steve knows this. I don't know if everyone else knows this, but I published a book with my daughters called Pennymoors. So Pennymoors is a novel project I did, and it's been a wild journey. I mean, I'll tell you, like we were a finalist for Book of the Year on Goodreads. It's kind of like often compared to Harry Potter, but that is I'm a big fan of Harry Potter and this stuff. But this stuff actually, I do these same things on novels. It's no different. The types of books behind it, those same things. So yeah, there you go.
I'm a big middle grade reader. So I'll
There you
check
go.
that. Is that a middle grade book like Harry
Yep.
Potter?
Yeah, it's
Great. I'll check it
the
out.
protagonist is 11, so perfectly sweet spot
Oh,
middle grade.
great. So this has been my first year speaking right now as an extension of my business, which is social media marketing for wedding professionals. So it's a very
Mhm.
niche audience. So I wanted to ask when it's time to think of the book, would expanding beyond that niche, should I not have it so targeted because that's such a small audience? Kind of thinking about that.
Great question. And I'll kind of maybe answer this more in a high level behind it. So I think to your point, a little bit of, the question you're really asking is how do I design a book that maximizes my opportunities? That's the real answer behind it. And so I think the short version that I think is the biggest mistake that I think people make when writing a book today is they write looking in the rearview mirror, right? So here's the stuff I've done, and so I'm going to write about that stuff. And so I think the most important thing, and this is and I'm going to go kind of piggyback on Steve and my conversation a little bit here, is a lot of really what you have to do today to design a book that sells, that works, is you have to design it for word of mouth and then build word of mouth into the process. Those are the two things. You have to design a book that is set up for word of mouth. And number two, you then at the same point, you have to build word of mouth into it. So Steve's book is called Do the Unright Thing, right? That's the name of it. And so part of the reason why when we were talking, I picked up on that is because we actually have studied the science of what makes books spread today. So what actually makes a book spread? And so we describe this as your book helps define a new category. And so there's two ways that today's best speakers and best authors do this. One is their book or their platform helps you define a type of person, a person you could aspire to be, or a type of action, an action you could aspire to do. So type of person, type of action. So examples out there today of books that define a new type of person: Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, Originals by Adam Grant, The Go-Giver by Bob Berg, Untamed by Glennon Doyle, right? These are people you can aspire to be. The other one is actions you could aspire to do. Start with Why by Simon Sinek, Brave the Wilderness by Brene Brown, Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, Let Them by Mel Robbins, Do the Unright Thing. So the idea here is you want to define an action or a type of person. And so what I would encourage you to think about more than anything is it's not about a niche, right? It's about making it something that is simple for people to understand, but intriguing to share. Simple but intriguing. And what you want is you want it so that when people are on the stage and Steve walks off, you want them to be able to say to themselves, huh, that was really interesting. I learned something behind it. Okay, you want them to have that feeling. But what's more important is now when they go home tonight or they go back to the office the next day, they say, "Hey, what did you learn yesterday?" They say, there was this really great speaker. He taught me that we need to start to do the unright thing. Are we doing the unright thing enough times? And so what you're really trying to do is you're trying to create a systematic way to build word of mouth. So going back to you, and what I would encourage you to think about is you want to think about the people in your audience that you're reaching, right? That's what you're really trying to do. And so if you want to be someone that has a very specific message, but broad applicability, not just in the wedding market or not just in social media market, you want to think about like, is there something that I help people become that they might not have realized it could be? This is a person I want you to become as a result of what I teach you, I share you, I show you, or an action that I want you to start to do now as a result of learning me. So I don't know what they are, but when Steve was talking about himself, is basically what I tell people. So I remember the conversation well, is I asked Steve, like, what is something that, you would teach someone who's trying to learn from you? It's like, well, I've just become successful because I do the unright thing. I was an actuary and I always have been doing the unright thing. And the reason that matters is because no one else uses that phrase, right? So even, just being able to own a phrase is really important. But number two, it makes you word of mouthable, if that's even a real phrase. But that's what I would encourage you to think about. And if I were to, give you things to think about as you're doing it, is see what you talk to your clients, the people that love you. Like, do you help them like use different unique language of what that stuff is? Like, I want you to, blank, or I want you to be blank. And that oftentimes is where a great book lives at. And in particular, like I said, you want to have something that is word of mouthable. So it's simple to understand. Like, I know what it means to do the unright thing, but it's intriguing to share. Like, how, why, what? That's really what great books do. And they either define a new category of person that you could be or a new action that you could do.
Sounds terrific. Thank you. That was great.
Nina,
Yeah,
do you
of
want to
course.
explore that a little bit right now or no?
I mean, kind of.
Well,
I want to be respectful of other,
we can do a little
you
little
know,
little 5-minute hot seat here if you want. I think that would be. I think everybody would get value from that. I think.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, part of what I've struggled with is how to go from talking about social media and marketing to talking about those bigger picture things,
Mhm.
and having a bigger message with my speaking,
Yeah.
which would then turn into like, and I like what you're already saying, because I think part of what I try to teach with social media is to stop caring. Stop caring about the judgment, right? Start caring about the other stuff, what
Yeah.
matters and the
Well, and
connection.
I'll pick up on Steve here. So let me guide you through a little bit of like how
Yeah.
I would think about this one. And so hopefully this will be valuable for everyone. But I think the first and most important thing that I'll do, so let's start with again like where you are a little bit. So the first thing I would tell you to do is to sort of I want you to do a little visioning actually, and you can all do this with me, and we can use the chat if you want. But like the biggest thing I would tell you again, this process is hard. So the fact that you're like wrestling with it is not unusual. I always like to tell people what we're really trying to do is define a new category. It's hard not because you're doing it wrong, but because it's hard, right? If it were easy, everyone would do it. The big leap that I think most people are trying to make, especially as speakers, and this is something that I really like to point to people is all of you, all of the people in this room for sure are subject matter experts. You know things, you have expertise. And if you have expertise, if you're in the room with people long enough, you can usually help them, right? They'll tell you like, oh gosh, like it was really great. Like after an hour, they get it, right? The challenge of becoming someone who's really, really like word of mouthable is you have to do that when you ain't there. Right? That's what's hard about it. So that leap into true thought leader is hard because most of us don't design things that make it simple to understand, right? You got to make your listener feel smart enough to understand it, but also intrigued enough to do it. So it's a really interesting Goldilocks principle behind it. So that's the first thing I want to tell you. The second thing I've learned is hard to do to figure this out yourself. Like the analogy I'll use for you is it's a lot like trying to cut your own hair, right? Like you clearly know what a haircut looks like, but if I asked you to cut your own hair, like you just can't see it. So I'd wind up with a mullet again, right? And nobody wants that. So here's what I'll say. So I want you to put yourself on the stage, right? Imagine yourself, and you can all just do this here, and I'm happy to kind of answer questions in the chat as well. But you're on the stage right here, and you're in front of an audience of people that you want to influence. Now it's important. I want you to know that this is not like someone else's audience. This is your audience. They're there to come learn from you. So this is, it can be all different walks of life. So who are the different kinds of people are there? Think about people in social media, people in weddings, people in all the kind of people you want to influence. They're all there. So you don't get to pick your audience. They're all this diverse super people there. They're there. Then I want you to think about something that you could tell or teach this audience that would surprise them. Something they'll hear you say out loud and they'll go to themselves, huh, I had never thought of it that way. And the frame I'll give you is this. Everyone thinks or believes blank, but based on my experience, I'm convinced of something else. So what's that kind of unconventional insight? Everyone thinks this, I'm now convinced of something else.
So, just so you want me to answer? Like it's not rhetorical? Like,
No, no, not rhetorical at all. Yeah, this is
yeah.
like do it live, my
Um,
friend.
so I guess like everybody thinks that everything matters, right? And it doesn't. Like, especially whether it's in social media or not, everyone thinks it has to be perfect or that, it matters if, even if people judge you. It matters if people are seeing what you post. It doesn't matter.
So it's a good message. It's a negative message. So no one's going to buy a message to say it's not. Don't do like that. That's
Right,
not
right.
like. So you have to say. So if it's not about that one, what is it then? So give me the other side of your argument. So your argument is saying that people think a lot of stuff matters. So if not everything matters, what does matter?
Um, the people who are going to see it and respond how you want them to, right? The people who are going to see it and then buy from you. The people who are going to see it and their life is going to be
Not
changed,
the people though. I want to know what actually
Okay.
like because I think again you're getting into the trap of like focusing on the people. I want to know like so give me the answer. So all the judgment doesn't matter. So then what does matter? Not the people, but what is the thing that matters about content, about engagement, about
Right.
life?
So in the scope I am, it would be, the couples who resonate with what you say, and then they go to your website and then they do book you, you know.
Okay.
Yes, we could not post because we're afraid that someone we went to high school with is going to make fun of us. But at the same time, someone who's planning a wedding and needs what you offer is totally inspired and feels like a prayer was answered when they figured out you're here in their area doing what they need.
Okay. So then when you pull on that thread a little more, so, thinking about the clients you've helped, thinking those things behind it, like what changes for them when they actually start to put things out there, not for everyone, but for these people? Like what actually changes? What are the things that you see them do differently?
They start to see the value in being seen instead of the fear of being seen.
Hmm.
They see the value in what they do. They see the value in communicating and being social, of letting social media be a positive place, not a negative hub. You know, um,
Hmm.
those are some
Yeah.
things coming to mind.
Those are great, and I think those are really powerful. So then, a couple things that I'll play back to you, right? Like so part of I think what you're looking for here is you think about what you want, right? Is you want kind of people to feel what after they hear you on stage or after what is the kind of like the thing that you want them to feel or do or think?
Empowered, confident, and motivated.
Okay.
You know, wanting to post right away. Like when I see
Okay.
people taking the notes and taking out their phone, I know it's not because they're texting. I know it's because
Mhm.
they're so ready to make that post.
Okay, perfect. So let's put you back on the stage, right? You're back on the stage here. You're in front of this audience, right? And they love you. They love the energy. They love the way you talk about things. And now you're just about to send this group out in the world. You want to send them out in the universe, and you want to give them this charge or this call to action. And it can't be hire me, right? You want to get a charge, which is go forth and do this thing, think this thing, be. What do you want them to do as they leave the room? Go forth and what?
Uh, be seen, post, share.
Perfect. So I think you have something here, and I'll tell you, like I think that you do. I actually think you said I'll give you kind of what I would tell you could be
Mhm.
a platform for you. And again, the key thing that you're listening for is something that's simple to understand, but intriguing to share. Right? Simple, intriguing. That's the key thing. So what I would encourage, here's what I wrote down as you were sort of talking here,
Yeah.
in this way. So I think there's a slight tweak on what you said, but here's what I'm going to say to you: be seen again. Be seen again. Here's why I think be seen doesn't quite have that intrigue. The again part
Yeah.
means that I was seen in the past. And so now I can have that part of it. And so here's why something like that could work for you. Number one, it is not about weddings. It is not about social media. It really is about feeling like the work I'm doing matters, whatever the stuff is. So now you can talk to any conference in the world. You can talk to anyone in that way, but also you can talk about your strategy for social media in that regard. So number one, now this gives you a message you can use in different places, right? But number two, and here's what's great about it, is now you can basically target different people with the same message, right? Be seen again. a guide for entrepreneurs to reimagine their community and customer service strategy. Be seen again. How today's modern leaders create better communities today with their companies. Be seen again. A new approach to leadership by creating visibility and connection to those you work with. Like, how do those kind of resonate under this umbrella?
I think that was really great. Were you asking me how they resonate? Because they all
Yeah,
do. Like,
yeah.
yeah, because
Well,
it's
and that's
like,
what you want, right? You want a book
yeah,
that is not just for the wedding game, but it's for people who are leaders. It's for people who, so part of what you
yeah,
want is about a message that's very specific and broadly applicable. Here's the best thing for you. As soon as you said it, I looked for you. There's no book. So the most important thing now is now, if you want that to be a phrase, a concept behind it, you put it on your bio. So if you get serious about it, you say author of Be Seen Again, coming 2026. And you start the process, right? So now the process of building the book becomes a way you build your speaking gigs. Now, when people say, like, hey, I have a new book coming out. If you're looking for speakers, they'll have a new thing, I'll have a new book out. Like, that's how you start to build an engine around this thing. But I think Be Seen Again can be great because it's not about social media. It touches on a very, very deep, emotionally resonant piece of feeling lonely and isolated and judged and that kind of stuff behind it. And the last part is the intrigue is really key. The word again hooks you because you're like,
yeah.
well, I was before. And so it's about recapturing something I lost or something that I lost confidence in. That's why something like that would play.
This was really transformative. Thank you.
Of course,
And
of
I'd
course.
recommend everybody here, everybody watching the video, go back and rewind that part, even though that was for Nina. I think it was for everybody. Ask those questions yourself. Find a buddy to kind of echo back like Eric did there. Maybe do it for each other, that sort of thing. Because I think that's exactly what we did. Like, oh,
Yep.
that's where it just sort of comes
Yep.
from. You need somebody with Eric's brain to help figure this stuff out. So,
It's not even a brain. It's actually just,
oh,
again, I think it's a framework, right? Like, I think the most important thing is I'm listening for actions or I'm listening for
mm,
people, right? Like who you could become or what you could do. And I think we oftentimes have it. We're just close to it. It's hard to sometimes see. And so the most important thing is what you really, really want to make sure of is that when you actually get off the stage, that people can talk about your message afterwards. That is the big part of it. And so thinking yourself is, what do I want them to go talk about to their spouse, their business partner, their best friend? And how do I make sure that it's simple enough so they can understand? I know what it means to be seen again, but it allows me to go deeper into it. Like, was I seen in the past? Like, should I have been seen in the past? How do I get back? What does it mean to be seen? Like, there's a bunch of questions it instills. And so that's that sort of Goldilocks principle of it's simple enough, but not too simple, and it's intriguing enough, but not too esoteric. That kind of middle path is where it goes.
and for what it's worth, Dina, I had sort of a visceral positive reaction to that as well. Like, as somebody who sort of like, I felt like I was seen as a kid, and then you sort of get into the life stuff, and you like feel like you're just a number hidden somewhere. And now it's like,
Yep.
how can I be seen again? I want to, so
Yep.
there's an element to that, whether that's where you're going with it or not. But for me, that was a positive reaction.
Yep,
Uh,
agree. And I think it's also
Catherine,
for you, it
go ahead,
allows
Eric.
you to,
Go ahead.
yeah, be very specific to your core audience. Like you could certainly target people in the wedding space and all that kind of stuff behind it, but also it allows you to have something that, as a speaker, you want to be referable, right? You want someone who had a great experience at a wedding venue to say, oh, yeah, but it's not just, she's not a wedding speaker, right? She could talk about, she's not a social media speaker. She just talks about the power of, being aware and being seen and being authentic and being involved. Like that's the kind of stuff you can talk to employees in those ways. And so that's how you build a book that makes you bookable.
And from a speaking perspective too, like people don't, we're not famous. They don't remember our names either. I think that's one of the things that I would credit for growing speaking businesses. At one point, I was referred to as the Safari dude, and people are like, I don't remember his name, but who is the Safari guy, or who's the Unright
Yeah.
Thing guy? Who's the Be
Yep.
Seen Again gal? Like, I think there's an element of that when it's memorable that you're not expecting people then to remember who you were. They just remember that catchphrase, and now you're searchable.
Yep. And
Let's,
the last part of that one, just to
yeah.
Steve's point, is I do think that a lot of having a great category is then you have to be maniacal and relentless about like putting it on everything, right? Because to Steve's point, the hard part is people try to get really clever. They're like, well, I've got this thing and that thing and this thing and that thing. There's gonna be so many things that they don't remember you for anything, right? And so I think a big piece of this one and why I think again I credit this to Greg is you want to view this as like this is the focus brand for me for the next 2 years, right? Like as I'm developing this thing, as it's out there behind it, you can change it down the road, but it is about a 2 to 3 year asset and a category you do, and then you find the next shtick and you kind of go from there. That's what if you want to have like a long-term career as a speaker, you have to have that kind of reinvention thing that you're doing.
That's really good. Let's do Catherine, and then we'll go to Sherry.
Awesome. Thank you. That was helpful to actually listen to Nina's. I had a different question, but then when I listened to Nina's, I was wondering if I could do the same thing, if that's all right.
Sure.
Fine with me
Awesome.
if Eric's good with it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So
So,
I'm writing a book right now. It's on workplace communication and how we've essentially just overcomplicated it. I've submitted a trademark application for light bulb conversations, that term light bulb conversation. So I'm it's worked into like my tagline about, I help teams, leaders, organizations illuminate the light bulb conversations that transform how they work together.
mhm.
So the essence of the book is basically how we've overcomplicated workplace communication, our expectations of one another in terms of workplace communication. And I think I'm just trying to still get to like, where am I going with this? Like what does it matter? I've been conducting my own survey research with professionals around the country in terms of, like how they respond to certain words in the
Yeah.
workplace, like culture forward terms that we typically think are really awesome. They actually don't think are really awesome, so basically
Yeah.
things like that. And so I
So can
guess
I give you can I
trying to
give you can
tie
I
it
give you my
together. Oh, go
yeah, let me
ahead.
give you my biggest feedback right away. So I think it's great. I think it's a really, it's a great concept. I like it. How many of you guys have seen Wicked, the movie Wicked, either the first or the second one? All right. So if you haven't, go watch it. They're great. But I think one of the things that I would tell with you that's really important in the first movie in particular is the wizard talks about one of the most important things is you need a bad guy, right? And so the problem is when things are, you need what we call a shared enemy. And so I think the biggest thing, in particularly in companies, is there's a really challenging thing that you have if you're reaching to try and sell into companies. And the reason is because you have to be willing to basically tear down the institution without tearing down the person that you're trying to get to buy from you, right? You want to basically
Right.
because you're subtly saying you guys suck at communication, right? And you need to, hire me to get not suck at communication. And so it's a hard balance. Like that's what the wrestling typically comes from. So the biggest thing that I would say hearing your concept behind it is I think you've got something that like makes sense as a concept behind it, but part of it is you want to think about how you turn it into a category. And sort of the way you do that is by building what we call a tension statement. And so your tension statement is really kind of what the construct is. So I'm gonna go back to Nina's a little bit just to give you an example of how you would do this in that way. And so I'll do it with Nina and then we'll talk about it for you. So her category concept, her sort of what she wants to do is be seen again, right? And so part of what you want to do is you want to create a bad guy that people sort of are like, they kind of agree with, but they hate it. Okay. And so the big thing is the opposite of that is be louder, right? Or be loud again, right? Everyone thinks that if you want to basically stand out today, you got to be loud again. And if you want to succeed in business and marketing, you got to be loud again. I'm going to tell you that the most successful companies focus on being seen again, right? That idea behind it. So what happens there is you create a shared enemy so that your solution feels much more authentic in that way. So everyone needs a bad guy. And for Nina right here, the way to do that one is this idea that people are loud and influencers and stuff like that. And you want to move away from that. That's not what the world wants because when people hear it, it's like, how many of you think that like the most successful people on social media today are the loudest, they post the most? Almost everyone would agree with that. I'm here to tell you that the people who are really thriving today, they focus on being seen. And I'm going to show how you can be seen again, right? That was fucking great. So the reason that I think it works is because of that, right? We now are able to create a shared enemy. So for you, I think, Catherine, as you think about this one, is you have to think about what actually is the problem that we all agree on, right? So light bulb conversations part of what you're sort of illuminating there behind it is that really we don't have these hard conversations, right? That's kind of what you're talking about. The light bulb conversation is ones where it's meaningful, it's powerful, it's like something that actually matters. And
And but
so
they're also simple. Like
well, hold on,
that's
hang on just a second here.
yeah.
It's
Okay.
not hard or simple, right? But part of it
Mhm.
is the reason we're not doing them is because of a lot of stuff out there of like, well, we don't have time and we don't, we're afraid, we don't want to like all these things. So if you think about like what people hate about workplace communication, what would you say right now that people hate about communication in their job?
I think
Like what's not
one
working in communication today in that
I
company?
think one example would be I think so many people leave meetings wondering what do we do? Or like what was that about? And I think it stems from us talking around issues versus being direct about them. One parallel that I could potentially draw is I've heard that it's like there's elements that are sort of like radical candor, but I'm not talking about just like word vomit, say whatever's on your mind, that type of thing, like that,
Mhm.
not that level of radical candor, but basically like refocus on, okay, what are the three things that actually matter
You don't
here?
have three things. You get one thing. So don't give yourself the excuse. You can have three things, right? Like so, and again, I'm going to push you on this one. Like the light bulb moments thing is great, but I think that the big part that's I think what right now it's a nice idea, right? Like yeah, of course we'd like to have that one. Like, and I think the challenge you have is you have something that's interesting right now, right?
Mhm.
Interesting. The big part of it for you when it becomes really great is having something that is an alternative to something else, right? So light bulb moments, again, I don't quite know if I fully understand what a light bulb moment is just from the face of it. And again, not I don't want you to explain it, but the light bulb moment thing doesn't necessarily illustrate something specific to me of what it is. But I think that like Rob was right in those things, right? Like this idea of thinking that like why did we have that meeting, right? And that kind of thing behind it. And so part of me wonders if what you're saying in this a little bit is rather than taking aim at communication, take aim at meetings, right? Like basically like, do we have these update meetings versus light bulb meetings or whatever it is? And meetings are where are these, whatever these things that happen into it. But to take it something that's a bad guy, right? Really, really push on a bad guy. Because I don't know if I know what the moment is yet in a company, but everyone in here started like leaning into you talked about the meetings and stuff like that. Figure out who your bad guy is and then create the opposite, right? Like update meetings, like nobody wants update meetings, but really people want light bulb meetings. What's a light bulb mean? I want to know what that thing is. How do I do it? How do I have them? And how do I have them in more of my lives? And so that's why I would almost give you something to think about. Is there a pivot here? Like that is intriguing. Like light bulb moment is interesting right now. Light bulb meeting to me is intriguing because I know what a light bulb is, I know what a meeting is, but I don't know like I want those, but I don't know what they are because I don't want the shitty meetings I have right now. So that's how I would encourage you to think about the tension statement of it is build it up from the bad guy as opposed to start with what I've trademarked and kind of say, how do I find a bad guy? Because I think you might be closer, but I do think it might come down to that meeting piece of it if you're just trying to build up from it.
So would the bad guy be like the processes? Because that's,
Bad
I
guy would
think,
be meetings. The bad
well,
guy,
it's not
the
but
bad
the
guy would be
thing is like
update
it's not a
meetings.
book about meetings. That would be like one example of many. It's
I
more
think
about
I
like,
yeah, I think you're so I'm telling you it is a book about it is a book about meetings, but it's not about like it's not about like the meetings are actually remember the way to grab people's attention is to make it something they can understand, right?
uh-huh.
And so it doesn't mean that this is about how to have better meetings. It's just the bad guy is the illustrative example of this one is these light bulb these the update meetings that we have all this stuff the communication is an illustrative example of what's going on but for you the meeting is when that or the light bulb is what you're trying to do but showcase it against a bad guy will make it easier for people to sell and buy it
Mhm. All right, well,
so
consider that. Thank you, Eric.
of course. Yeah. I think for you, just focus on, if I were to encourage you to do anything, is ask not what people like, but what people hate. And the more you're able to build an alternative to what they hate, the more likely you are to make it. Because especially if you're selling into corporates, you need a bad guy. They need someone that they hate. And if it makes their company feel bad or feel uncomfortable that they're doing something wrong. Like we're not good communicators, whatever it is, it doesn't work. But everyone would agree like meetings are unnecessary. They don't like it. And so think about what that like would be for you. And I think you'll find that will help you find a clear picture on what you are.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, of course.
All right. Sherry Z.
Awesome. So do you recommend coming up with a title for your book before writing it so then you can start promoting it
Yep. Yeah, I
with just the
recommend.
title?
Yeah, I recommend everyone should start. So I would tell people this about the having an idea for a book means it's not real. Having a title for a book means that it will be real in other people's minds. So what I tell people about titles is you should have something, you should have a strong title loosely held. And so you should have something that you say, this is my title, but it should be loosely held. You can change it because the important thing to know is that no one will remember what your title actually is or was. They'll remember what it is, but they won't, it will change. Like I remember this. I had a book title that's my book on mentorship. It changed like 6 times along the way. I kept updating, testing things. And afterwards, I was like, and so this is the final title I've settled on and stuff like that behind it. And a lot of people were like, oh, I didn't even know you changed the title. Like, the people are not thinking about it. So I think you want to have a title to make it real. It's valuable in that way. But I would just say, don't worry about it. It doesn't have to be the perfect title. You just need to have one so that people see this not as a project, but as a real book in that way. So I always tell people the way to make your book project real externally is you have to have a working title and you have to have an expected publication date. If you don't have those two things, I would not be public about your book. So you have to have those two things. Now, again, both of those can be moving targets, right? But the way, if you want to get value from your book before it's done, is you have to have a working title and an expected publication date so that the market will perceive it as real. The third one that can add even more benefit to that one is having a publisher that's with it, right? That will help a little bit, but that's not required. But those things are certainly kind of valuable there.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And just a quick
And
follow-up to that. You saw
may I answer
Nina's.
Nina's question
Yeah,
real quick?
please do that.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So in general, what I would say part of this one is, and I think this is where, a lot of people wrestle with this one is I think books are hard, right? They're moving targets. So in general, what I would tell you is I would not put a timeline down unless you have some kind of external accountability holding you to it, right? So like for us in general, like our typical author spends 12 months from start until publishing. So our typical author, they sort of start the process, and about 6 months from then, they will announce their book. So they will, sort of the way it starts is you start working on it, you build a draft of it, and then you make a public announcement, this idea of building this, community. And then about 5 to 7 months after that, it's published. So my general rule is, I would make sure that you have, a book coach, you have a writing program, a publisher, to make sure that you're holding that where, because the problem is it also will look bad if you change the date a lot of times, right? I mean, generally speaking, saying like it's 27 is fine, so long as you have a systematic way to get there. But I kind of believe in the James Clear rule of if you have a goal is just a dream unless you have a system underlying it. And so a goal is just a dream unless you have a system. And so figure out your system. And that usually involves some level of accountability before you commit to a date.
Okay. All right. Elizabeth. There you go.
Okay, so this is unbelievably helpful and both confirming on the stuff I've done in the past that's worked, and then a cautionary tale for what I need to switch out going forward. So the working title of the book that I've been interviewing folks and involving lots of people in the research is The Praise Paradox, the science-backed habit that great leaders get right. And trying to kind of mess with your constructs, I'm finding that it needs simplification, but the basic idea is that the paradox is we generally appreciate praise, don't get enough, but don't see ourselves as the person who's going to give it. And so you have this praise deficit, but the reality is that the giver and the receiver both benefit neurologically and culturally from the exchange. And so
you should I'll simplify it right there. like work from a place of give more praise. Like that's it. Like don't like the praise paradox. All the other stuff you said is complicated, but like you basically said give more praise. So that's summarizing what it is. But I would tell you, like as soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, I want to give more praise. But how do I do it? When do I do it? Like that. That's what I would just. I would. The paradox thing is like it's clever, but I don't. When you said it right away, I was like, it made me uncomfortable. I'm just giving you the reaction. I was like, well, like you said all these words like science and like all this stuff, but you want to make it so that the person knows like I want to do this, but how do I do it? How do I do it right? How do I do it well? And so I would just push you if to make it simpler. Like that's what I would say is give more praise or something like that. Like of like the praise paradox makes you sound smart, but it doesn't make you sound approachable. Just my candid 2 cents.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Right. And I hope you know this. Like I always tell people, like I always try to just give like feedback, but this is not meant to see like you should do this. But my framework is always I'm giving you the feedback in the context of how I see it as type of action, type of person. And so I feel like the praise paradox falls into neither, unfortunately. Like it's not an action or person. And so I think you either need to be like the praise leader or the leader of praise or something like, or, someone who talks about that person who you can become, or the action to do in that one. And so I think that idea of give more praise, it's super obvious, right? But nobody does it, which is why it'll work, I think, because of that sense there.
That's awesome. And the other thing you said, which I had on my to-do list, and I've gotten a list of book coaches, is to vet this and, the idea of it. But I think the working title obviously is a piece of that. So that was really helpful to hear.
Sure, of course.
So ultimately, there's some questions about manuscripts and stuff. And just so you guys all know, Eric did not ask to like pitch manuscripts or whatever too, but if there's questions about how it looks like to work with Eric, we'll let him do that. But just please know that this is not like a big sales pitch thing.
He's I actually told you the opposite. I said, I'm happy to be helpful.
Yeah,
but like,
that's what he even said. He said, I don't want to be a sales pitch thing. So I strongly endorse working with him, but this is not supposed to be a sales pitch. But there are questions about how to work with you. But before we get into that, kind of a follow up to maybe what Elizabeth said, somebody else had mentioned this earlier too, kind of about the title and stuff too. Like, so my experience was my title changed. The Unright Thing stayed the same.
Yep.
Subtitle changed. I was writing like a how-to book, scientific. I had like 70,000 words written with like 60 different citations. And I just kept telling the editor, this isn't me. This isn't who I am. I'm not an expert. I don't want to be an expert. And finally just kind of broke down the manuscripts team and they said, all right, just write a memoir then. So it's and so, I mean, the question inside the question is whether it's a title change, whether it's the content, what wins out between like, the right answer for a simple title versus we like the praise paradox. We get our content and what's the right thing to do in the marketplace versus our own personal passion and excitement about a title or the content. Like, how do you reconcile those when it feels like we want to do this? Like our heart is telling us this, whether it's a title or whatever, but then we have experts like you telling us to do something different. Like, how do we reconcile that? That could be true on stage as well as writing.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing I'll take a general thing about doing this sort of stuff is I think the first thing is when you're doing a book is it's your name on it. So at the end of the day, like you have to feel excited and confident, comfortable with those things behind it. So don't listen to any Yahoo just because he showed up at 2 hours in your thing, right? Like I am here purely to give you another take on these things. So, I tell people have strong opinions loosely held, right? Like that's the way I live my life in that sense behind it. So I think the big thing that I would just go back to it, if I were to really help you understand my framework for making choices with your book, is I really do think that the best books are highly empathetic to your reader. Right? They're highly empathetic to your reader. And so the reason that I reacted quite the way I shared feedback to Elizabeth on her concept is not because I think it's bad. I think it's fine. I think it's great. I think it could certainly work behind it. But I think if I were trying to do something, she talked about leadership, she talked about people in companies and organizations, is that you want to think about the person that you're trying to reach and what they need to hear. And so in general, I think about it from a standpoint of like, get a group of people together. So if Elizabeth was thinking about like how this should be, is come up with a list of 5 to 8 different sort of directions, titles, categories, stuff like that behind it, and have one-on-one conversations. Like, what do you feel resonates the most with you? And so that's why I encourage most people, the biggest thing that I would learn as you're figuring out how to make those choices is to split those choices into 2 buckets. So the first thing I would tell you to do is do not worry anything about anyone else's feedback to finish a draft of your fucking manuscript. Please just finish a goddamn draft of it. I don't care what you need to do, but just get it. And I'll give Steve credit for this one. He finished a draft and he didn't love it. And kudos to you till your core for just fucking finishing. Why? Because now you can make it awesome, but you can't make something awesome that doesn't exist. And so the first piece I would tell you is run like mad based on the best incomplete information you have to get to a point where you have something. And then have a community of people that you trust and then give you feedback to make something awesome. And that's the simplest framework of these things. So the nice thing that I would tell you to Elizabeth right here is it doesn't fucking matter that I say anything or whatever it is. The paradox principle or whatever, the praise principle, paradox, whatever the fuck, it doesn't matter right now, right? The only thing that matters is if this helps you have enough confidence to get to draft done, you're great. And then what I would tell you is give the introduction and 5 titles to 25 to 50 people that really, really you want to reach. Like, I mean, I'm kind of your target, but not really your target, right? Give it to them and make them choose that behind it. So the following, if I were to give you about how to work with feedback, external feedback from yahoos like me and whoever it is again, use it to help you keep momentum, but not to make you feel like you're stuck. That's the big thing. So if it helps you, great. If you need to have a title, great. But whatever it is, like have those things. And then at that point, do not trust one person to be the magical person who knows all the things, right? If I think give more praise is great. I'm just one dude, right? You should ask 100 people or 1,000 people of those things behind it. And the best thing that I would tell you about getting feedback on things from a wider pool of people is they feel special. And I'll tell you a true story. So with this book, Pennymoors, right? I put this book together and we do it with every author. Steve is one example too. So we have every author, our art team produces 4 to 6 covers for everyone, 4 different cover directions, right? And so this is the cover that I saw right away. I was like, this is awesome. I loved it. This is great. And, but I said, let me take all of the covers. So I had 5 different covers behind it and I sent them out to 800 different beta readers and people in my community behind it, a big shitload of people. And the results were, about 60% of people chose that one. And so that's the one we went with. To this day, I will tell you, I talk to people who, were part of this process behind the way, and they will come up to me and say, Eric, I'm so glad you chose my cover. I'm so glad you chose my cover because they felt that they appreciate it. So going back to the idea of feedback and those things, you want to ask for lots of feedback. And that is awesome, but ask for it and when it actually kind of matters to the excellence of the book. So the first thing is, who cares about feedback to get your draft done? Get a draft done. And then at that point, be a benevolent dictator. Ask for lots of feedback. Take whatever route that you want to do, even with all the feedback. But no, the sheer ask of asking for feedback will make people feel more connected to what you have. So that's my 2 cents on it is I think think about feedback in 2 buckets. Do not let any feedback stop you from getting a draft, and then use feedback to basically create connections and feeling of belonging to your project, not necessarily to help you pick the right answer or the right thing.
Eric, how are you doing on time? You want to be done at I only asked for a commitment to the bottom of the hour.
I booked off till 5 o'clock, so you got me till 5 if people want to stay and ask questions. Yeah,
we're putting you in a tough. How are you going to say no to this group, right? But I do want to honor your time.
I mean, you told me it was. I blocked it off, so you're fine. It's not like I'm perfectly great to do it. So
well, we'll take the extra time. We'll take the extra time if you're willing to give it.
Happy to do it.
Well, so I know at least I think it was Catherine and Nina at least asked about what it looks like to work with you, and then you want to share a little bit about that. Then we'll get to Ari, who has her hand up as well. Or Amy, do you have a question, or you have to go? Oh, you just have a question, Amy? Oh, okay. So we'll do so talk a little bit about what it's like to work with manuscripts. Then we'll go Ari, and then we'll go Amy.
Yeah. So I mean, the first thing I'll tell you is like we just at a high level behind it. If you want to like spend more time with me, we operate as a social venture B corporation. So our mission is to empower modern authors today. So historically, what we try to really do is we accept about 10% of people into the program that are interested in working with us. We really are looking for people that have 2 things. Number one, we want people who have a business case beyond book sales, and which everyone in this room does. And then number two, we want to make sure that you have something that is word of mouthable, right? That sort of word I made up there. And so the hard part about that one is I can't know that unless we spend time together. So that's the first thing I would sort of say is I'm happy to spend time with anyone that really wants help. And whether you decide to work with us or not, I'm happy to do it. So if you want to spend a half hour with me doing category design, there's my link behind it. No obligation, no anything. I just believe that you should figure out you have a book worth writing before you set out to write it. So that's part one. How Manuscripts works is kind of based on our little insights here along the way. So I'll just kind of lay out what the process looks like behind it. Like I said, first step is you got to hang out with me. I'm sorry, but that is kind of the screen to make sure that there's something here that works. Once we start with an author, really the biggest insight that we've learned along the way is that, books are hard. They're just generally challenging, right? Like 98, 99% of people that start a book will never finish it. And our insight is really pretty simple, is basically that the reason most people fail at books is because they treat them like a gym membership, right? They get excited about it. They go for 3 weeks and then life, right? So what we've learned is if you're going to finish something great and on time, you can't treat it like a gym membership. You have to treat it like a personal trainer. So our approach is different. Like what we do is we basically have learned that you just pair someone up every week for a year with a one-on-one session along the way, specific things along the way. So our first sense is that you spend the first basically like 8 to 10 weeks not doing any writing, right? It's funny to say, but you do the work to design the architecture. So it's called positioning. So we typically spend about that much time with people. We have some tools to help people, but really what we want to build is the architecture of the book. Now, this sounds really like, well, of course, I've written a table of contents. I'm sure this is not the same. It's very different, right? The big thing to know behind it is you really want to understand how to architect your book so it's not just a book. You want to architect the book so it can be easily morphed into 3 different keynotes. You want to build your book so that your introduction can be your TED Talk. You want to build your book so that it creates word of mouth. And so you really want to build the architecture of it first. And the reason we've learned this is so important is because once you have this one, then you don't write the book, you build it. So next step is you spend about 16 weeks with us working one-on-one with a developmental editor. You're part of a community, so there's a group of about 20, 30 other authors with you. We have live sessions every week, but really what you're doing is you're working with a developmental editor to build a manuscript. And our goal is that every week you're going to meet with your developmental editor. Most authors spend about 4 to 6 hours a week working on their manuscript, and then we have a draft. So that's really what our goal is, to get people to a draft point in really about 5 to 5.5 months. That's what we do. Historically, about 95% of our authors get there. That's just the data. But really, it becomes down to the accountability. That's really what it is. From there, our next step is an interesting one. And it really is kind of what I think is different about our process is we've learned at the next step, you don't just go say, now let's publish this thing. The next step is actually to build this community. And this is what Steve referred to really as both surprising and also incredibly powerful for modern authors today. We actually help authors design an announcement campaign. So the announcement campaign is different than putting on your LinkedIn bio. It's actually about building out a campaign to get about 200 to 300 people involved in the book. And I will tell you, like I've talked to thousands of big name authors. Dan Pink's my neighbor, Simon Sinek. I've talked to all those people, and every one of them will tell you the same thing. The way to make a book succeed is you have to have a community who's involved in it first. So that's really what we do. Our typical goal is we build an e-commerce site. So you're not just saying buy the book, you're saying, and here's the keynote that comes with it. Here's the workshop I do with it. You sell knowledge products associated with the book. That really is what creates, again, a community. So generally we get about 200 to 300 people involved in the book with you. Those people become your early readers. They give you feedback. That's why so many of our authors win awards, because we help them have feedback. But then the real thing that happens is this is how you create word of mouth. Every person that buys your book before it's done, they will tell 3 to 5 more people to read the book. So that's how you create a flywheel. That's how you make it spread. And the cool thing is they don't just spread the book, right? Now they're spreading you and their talks. And the other benefit of us doing it this way, we can take the proceeds from that pre-sale campaign, and that's what funds cover designers, editors, layout, audiobook. That way, every author in our community always owns 100% of their work. That's kind of how it is. Then it takes about 5 or 6 months to produce the book. So we always help authors produce paperback, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. And then we help you release them. And we release them over the course of at least a year. So that way you can use them as these sort of launchable moments. So that's how the program is sort of set up and runs. Like I said, the first step is to just make sure that there's like a good match here. So the 2 things that we always look for is there a business case here? And so if someone is doing paid speaking already, you have a business case, like you want to do more speaking typically, but different people have different things. And then part of it is making sure that there's a concept here that is sort of word of mouthable, or we call it category defining. And then once we do that, we sort of go. So we have a group, we run these groups about every quarter or so. So we have a winter group that'll start up here in January. I don't know if I didn't tell Steve this, but I'll be doing a new book as well with this kind of winter group. So my new book is called Inflection Point. So that's kind of what I'm working on as well. So I do this because I need it as well, and that's kind of how and why it works there. So that's how the process works. I'm happy to go through more details, but that's the main gist of it. And I mean, we do a lot, like I'd say it's driven by human accountability, like that's what works. But we have a lot of like technology and tools that live behind it to help authors do it more efficiently. So that's kind of how Manuscripts works.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, if
That's
there ends
awesome.
up being some questions on that, we can dig into that too. Otherwise, let's go to Ari right now.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your insight first off, Eric. That's
Of course.
really appreciated. Um, I had a comment and then I actually had a question. So my comment was on building that community. When I launched my book, I did it very quickly. It was more of to prove the point of the unstoppable mindset that you can do anything you put your mind to. So I launched a book in 45 days and from start to finish. So it was tell everyone that I'm doing it so that I can't back out. And with that, I started like a pre-registration page, getting everybody registered, being able to do email blasts, being able to shout out to people. Like holding yourself accountable when you start writing a book is like the biggest piece, I think,
Yep.
that people lose on. So I strongly suggest that building your beta testers, building like I did a cover launch. I did those, they do feel so much more connected with you and with your book if they're helping with that.
Yep.
Let them pick your author headshot. Like you get final say, but if they feel like they had a say, was just great. But my question for you, now that I have a book, and obviously I did it pretty quick, and I did the book launch, and I'm at the book tour phase, I would love to hear what you have to say about book tours. I technically, so I launched Amazon on August 15th, did my 2 weeks later, did my book launch. I've done a couple like speaking events mixed with a book signing in other states, but now I want to actually launch like here is a designated book tour. We're traveling, we're speaking, making money while doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So first, congratulations, right? And again, I'd say it sounds like you did all the things, you just did them in a way that's like very, very fast. So kudos to you. And I don't recommend most humans do that one. So I just
No,
say, like,
definitely don't recommend for a
and,
normal human
and
being.
part of the reason for it, again, I think it worked for you in this way, which is great. The one thing that I think we have learned too is that I think part of the reason that it does typically take longer than that is if you want people to actually read your book, they need more time than that. So part of the reason for the beta reader period is extended in that one is that if humans need time to participate and then get feedback into that one. So I think it's all right on the things, and then recognize that proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, to go together. Is that in general, you got to take more time to get people's shit and package and organize in that way. So that's kind of why it just usually takes longer. But kudos to you for doing it. I think the book tour question is a really good one, and I'll tell you two things about book tours that I would sort of just say is I think the first thing is we encourage every author to talk about events after the book comes out as part of a book tour. So I think the funny thing is that the reality of it is that the phrase book tour is just about packaging up things you're already doing for a book. And so my sense to you behind it is the fact that you have a desire to do events and you're already doing them is you just start to say, and I'm doing this podcast as part of my podcast book tour. And I'm doing this event coming up at my friend's house. So talk about it with certainty as a book tour will help. The market perception of being on a book tour matters. The second thing I'll tell you, though, about doing an actual tour itself. So we have a program to help authors do book tours. And the way that we've learned to best make them both effective and profitable is to model them on how political campaigns operate. So the way to do a most effective and profitable book tour today is to start by identifying cities where not are the best like cities, not to say like I love New York and I love LA, but to look at cities where you have a density of humans that are fans of yours. So you don't need to know a bunch of people, but if you can usually find 4 to 8 people that you would consider fans, people who would do you a solid because you've done them a solid, put a tour there. So the way you do this one is you just do exactly what the political campaigns do, is you reach out to them and say, hey, listen, I'm going to be doing an event here. I'd love for you to be on my host committee. And they'll be like, that sounds awesome. I'd love to do it. And so you say, great. Like all we're going to do is just get together. Like we'll have dinner beforehand. We'll kind of do an event behind it. I mean, I'll sell books, we'll do tickets, whatever it is. But part of it is you have this host committee, and then you basically talk with certainty about the host committee, and then you encourage them to each do, 4 to 6 people. So that's the model that works quite well for book tours, is you basically, again, number one, make every single thing that you're doing part of your book tour. Number two, if you want to do formal events in cities like that one, start with the host committee, ask them to be your host committee. And many times the people in the host committee will be willing to host you at their office, at their company, at their social club, whatever it is, and then encourage them to be the ones that invite people to it. So that's the best way to do book tours today if you want to make something kind of both efficient and also profitable and effective.
Awesome. Appreciate you.
Of course.
All right, we've got Amy, then Sue, but I want to quick jump in here, Eric. Is there, and reminder, this is recorded, it's just internal for our ASC people. But are you willing to share a bit about cost of the program on this,
Yeah,
or would
for
you
sure.
rather do that on the one-on-ones?
No, I'm happy to do it. Yeah.
Okay.
So we're I think the part of this is one of the benefits of spinning out of Georgetown is we did decide to make the choice to formalize this as a social venture B corporation. So we do use grants to fund part of our operation. So it's not my job. I do this as like a part of other things. So, but that helps cover some of the funding for the operations side. The tuition that we charge, so we have a tuition for the program that really just goes to support the one-on-one session. So like I said, our learning is it's a personal trainer, which is why 95% people succeed. So for the year-long tuition, it's $9,900. That's the investment that authors make. We can help people spread it out over the course of time if they want, but usually that's kind of what we try to do for it. Most of our authors are, usually able to be very ROI positive within a year of doing the book process. So that's typically what we sort of see. But that's kind of the investment behind it for people if they're looking for kind of what the cost would be.
Does that include the marketing elements and everything too, or is that more like, is that creating the manuscript, or does that also include launch plan and
yeah.
the
It includes everything so the way we talk about it is $9,900 is to basically build the positioning, build the manuscript, and then ultimately announce the book and get 200 people involved in it. So we pair you up with a launch coach who helps you. We have an e-commerce platform. We do email newsletter, all that kind of stuff to get 200 fans involved in the book. So that's kind of everything's included. And then our typical author, we get 200 to 300 people involved in the book. We use the proceeds from that pre-sale campaign to fund the production costs of a paperback, hardcover, ebook, and audiobook. So that's kind of how the model is set up to do it. And it works. I mean, it works really well. And that's sort of the reason why it works is you're not just getting a manuscript, you're actually getting a community of it and then turning it into kind of an asset that we should be an 18-month at least asset for people.
All right, cool. Thanks for being transparent about that.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Of course.
Amy, and then we'll go Sue.
Thank you so much, Eric. This has been great. Highly informational. Love it. I feel like I'm kind of at the beginning stage of what do I want my book to be about in terms of even like what I'm speaking about. I'm in the environmental space. I have a zero waste store, which I'm currently in. So I work a lot in my community, teaching them how to be more sustainable, live more zero waste. So my messaging the last couple of years has been those terms, but they're not very popular now. So I've kind of in a gray area of like how to proceed and what my message should be, which would then be my speaking and my book. So I'm wondering if you have any suggestions on where I should go from here.
Yeah, good question. And I think this might be helpful for anyone, again, who, anyone who wants to spend time with you. I'm happy to spend more time with you just as a general thing. I'll tell you the thing that I always encourage people to do before we first meet together is not to worry too much what your book's about. I know it's a little funny to say that one, right? Because everyone's like, well, I gotta know what's my book about. Like, I gotta meet with you. I know what the book's about.
Right.
I'm actually much less concerned about that one. We'll figure out what your book should be about. But the more important thing, if I were to give you any kind of counsel, especially as someone who is looking to leverage this to build more speaking and more outcomes, is to think about the places that you want to bring your message. Like, what are the conferences in 2026 that you'd love to keynote at? What are the organizations you'd love to get in front of? Who do you want to consult for? What boards do you want to serve in? Think about places. And the reason this all matters so much is the way that books spread is by word of mouth. So the key thing we got to figure out is if we're going to create word of mouth, we got to figure out whose mouth you want the words in, right? So think about places, and then what's neat about it is you can start to visualize like who they are, not just like I hate the idea of an ICP, my like ideal customer profile, like that's an imaginary thing, right? But if you think about a conference that happens, like who's there? Who would be the people? What are they going to care about in that sort of way? And so that would be my suggestion to you is to think about that and ultimately think about like what would be a game changer for me to speak in front of which audience that would help me with my business or that would help me with whatever it might be. And I think usually when you do that one, it gets it out of this abstract, like, what is the market for my book? That's not a thing. It doesn't exist. There's no market for your book, right? There are people who give a shit about your message who will spread it for you. And so when we get out of this idea of like the market or whatever it is, it does not actually exist. There are people that you can turn into fans and evangelists who will spread this thing for you. And the biggest way to find is where they're concentrated. So that would be my advice to you is don't worry what your book's about right now. Just focus primarily on the places you want to bring your message and everything will get a lot easier for you from there.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a good start.
Yeah. And also, especially if you're looking to transition to something else, remember to think about you're talking a lot about like a kind of like a niche or an industry, right? Like zero waste, that kind of stuff behind it. Part of it is you're thinking about people who are in that. And part of what you want to think about is flip it to people who care about that, but are not in it, right? So you might want to speak at leadership conferences or people who are in marketing because they care about that, but they're not in it, right? So your ability to bring them in that way is what's neat. And many times the best books that exist are actually combining two things people didn't seem to combine. So the idea of understanding how leadership and the ability to think about the environment are really important, or the ability to think about communication, like that's what exists. So think about places, and remember, it's not about a niche necessarily. It's about kind of a message. Who do you want people to be, and what could you ask them to do?
Well, and I feel that's super important because I want to get the message out there because I have diehard clients and they're kind of extreme in a way. And then there's the rest of the world who
That's right.
actually is interested, but they're actually like to talk about it, but not do anything about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's who I want to target.
Well, and so think about what conferences those people are at that you would go to.
Okay.
Right. And so for you, it's going to be a lot of new things, right? It's going to be like, I want to go to blah, blah, blah thing and blah, blah. Like that's the places to do. And once you start to do that one, you'll get a much better visual of who the aspirational customers are versus the kind of the hardcore fans that you have already.
Right. Okay.
Don't you guys love that about 2 hours ago, Eric started off talking about how he's not smart enough to do this or that or the other? Like you get why I have it. I mean, yeah, right.
I just try really hard.
You're just really good, a good actor. You're good at faking everything.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, Sue.
Hi, Eric. It's nice to meet you. I have two books. One just came out about a month and a half ago, and my audience is I primarily focus on corporate leaders, helping them understand the importance of visibility in order to get noticed, get promoted, get opportunities. And my message is going really well. Like there's a lot of companies that don't really know about this, and I had to learn it myself, so I can easily speak about it. And I've done a lot of speaking with employee resource groups and getting into companies and doing, bigger things like that. My goal, and I'm just curious if you've done this with anyone, is to try to get my product, my assets, whatever you want to call it, licensed in a leadership program so that I can get recurring income, first of all, and maybe certify people, train the trainer, or whatever that looks like to, again, have more people than just me so I can scale. So I'm just curious if you've done anything similar to that and if you feel like it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. I'm just curious your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of people do it. I mean, I have some, there's Naveed is someone who has done it in the world of, leadership training and coaching and stuff like that. I've had people do it in, corporate courage, all kinds of things. So a couple things I'll tell you about like how, so the first thing I'll share with you a little bit about how to think about this in terms of it. So the first challenge, and it's a very, very common thing that I think people do, and you're probably not, it's not surprising to me where you're at that you would want this because in general, like, people are an expert at being in the delivery game, right? You've delivered it, and then you probably did the first book and you got more delivery of it. Now you're like, I've done enough delivery. I'm tired of delivering. So like that usually is what happens is you're like good at delivering, but you're like, God, the prize for the pie eating contest is more pie, right? Nobody wants that. So, that idea. So I think what happens then is you want to move into this place where how can I not have to be the one that delivered? And so the first thing I'll tell you is just make sure that you're careful what you wish for because you just may get it. And it is a different thing. So like I always tell people to really, really be sure that that's what you want because it's different, right? It's a different thing. You lose control is sort of what happens in that sense. Now, not a bad thing. I just like people to understand what's going on. So the first thing that's really important is your message, just hearing you say it right now, is still super broad. So you cannot do this one if you're so broad because you're like trying, it sounds, I don't even know what it is yet, right? And so in general, where people are able to license it is they're able to find something that is very specific that they can own. So I'll give you an example. So one of the examples of someone who created certification. So I'll give you two examples. One is this individual named Naveed. So Naveed wrote a book called Mastering Executive Transitions. And so it's very specific. Like that's what it is. It's just about mastering executive transitions. And it's a different approach. He's become now after his book, like the 2-time CEO coach of the year, like all this really cool stuff, but it's super fucking specific, right? And so the key thing behind it is he's not competitive with anyone else. He's not trying to do executive coaching he's just trying to do this thing. So the reason it works for him to license his stuff, and he's now working with several organizations that they bring him in to certify their coaches and their trainers on mastering executive transitions, is because he is super deep on something very specific that he's not competing. So he has cut out all of his executive coaching and he only tries to help people master executive transition. Because if you're competitive with someone else, they're not going to want to license your stuff because you're like kind of competing with them in that way. So the first thing is you have to be laser specific on a very specific problem that lots of people have, but lots of people may not do. So that's number one. Number two, you have to have a very, very specific delivery that is a very common problem that is solved often, right? So it has to be something that's not like, it's not a hard sell to do, right? So the example on this one is there's a woman named Jen Marr. So Jen Marr wrote a book with me. Anyway, it's called Inspiring Comfort. But the short version is she was one of the first people to volunteer at Sandy Hook after the Sandy Hook massacres. And what she did is she brought animals there to help with comfort care. So she developed this entire methodology on providing comfort care. And the idea is when we have these very specific and traumatic events that are large and they have these issues for lots of people, you have to have people who can go in and provide care. And so they work with universities, they work with, organizations to be able to basically certify people for comfort care. So that is something that it's not like there's no one really doing it. And it's something that everyone has to know. So the key piece for you, and again, I don't know enough about what you're doing to help give you that counsel, but I would sort of say is the first step behind it is this has to be like so simple that on the first time you say it, I get it. And you said a lot of words and I have no idea what the actual thing you do is. And I don't mean that as a critique. I just mean that like that won't scale, right? So you have to pick a specific thing, number one. And number two, it has to be so simple that everyone who hears it immediately wants it, right? Like if you're trying to basically make it that someone has to sell it for you, it's not going to work, right? Like if they have to like do the whole stuff, it's just that they have to be able to say like, oh gosh, like of course, like I already work with this one. I want them to also be able to blank, right? And that's kind of the piece of it. So I already do executive coaching. I want to be certified so that I can also tell people I'm a mastered executive transition, right? That's the part of it. So that it's like, it's not any hard thing. It's like, I also do this thing. Or every organization now needs to have this ability to do comfort care when they have, like, it's just, those are those things. So that's what it takes to do. And so I would describe right now what the challenge you have is you're still sound like a subject matter expert, right? You are, when you're in the room, you're awesome. But the big part of it is you have to be able to have something that when you're not in the room, it's so obvious that people can talk about it and use your methodology when you're not there. So to me, I think the leap in that one is an obvious one you want to make, but it will come from getting very laser specific and being the best in the world is a very specific thing. And then ultimately making the offering you have so obvious to everyone that it's an easy add-on for them in that way. That's typically how I see it done in that way. Does that make sense or help?
Yeah, I think I have to figure out who my bad guy is in corporate. And
Yeah.
to me, I think it's leadership training. It's, a lot of that stuff just doesn't work for the longer term.
Yeah. And
right?
I think and so I'd say that's like saying like love is good, right? So
Right.
leadership training is so broad behind it. So
Right, right.
it's about getting super specific. So what very specific thing? And like, again, that's like, kind of, Catherine didn't love my answer, but the idea of meetings being the thing, like you need something that's really, really specific and not ambiguous at all. But leadership training, it means 100 things, right? And so it's a very specific part of it. It's leadership training on the first 5 days in the company, or leadership training on your like, or dealing with how you talk at reviews or what. But it has to be so specific and so narrow and so obvious that it will work in that way. Because again, right now you're trying to take a subject matter expert, something that's delivered with customization, and try and make it repurposable. And I think it will take you a lot more cycles to get there. Not that it's not possible, but I think you're going to have to get way, way more narrow and way, way, way more obvious of the value to people before it will be sort of something you can hand off.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good feedback. Thank you.
You bet. Happy to help.
Yeah, do you have any follow-up there, Sue? Or are you good?
I mean, I think I have to think about it because I mean, my tagline is kind of helping high achievers who are quiet, introverted, learn how to talk about their successes and be visible and influential. You also have to have an organization who wants that, right? So there's a lot of leaders who don't necessarily want their leaders to succeed. They want them to stay where they are because they can control them. So I think there's some of that that's a lot of messaging. I have to think about how to really position that. And I guess I was always thinking about, do I have to create some kind of asset, a specific program, if you will, that is very easy. You think about Franklin Covey's things or Crucial Conversations. Those are examples of what are kind of add-ons to most leadership programs that they license.
Yep.
So I was thinking of something like that
That's what typically
build.
it is. So like another example, there's a woman named Nicole Bianchi. She wrote a book called Five Tough Talks. And so she teaches people to have 5 tough talks. And so she now has a certification for it. So it certainly works in that way. But I think it's, again, I think that you had to use a lot of words to explain what you're trying to do. And that's illustrative of a subject matter expert, right? You are, you want to provide a lot of things and you'll adjust it to what they need versus this is what I do. Like, I don't do anything else besides this one. And that's kind of the place that you get to when you can create certifications or you can create like licensure of your stuff. It really is very, very specific and very, very like broad, like very, very applicable in that way. And so it's just a totally different model. So you almost have to kill the golden goose to jump into that one, because if they see you as being competitive with them in your leadership training, it's hard to do. But I get it. It's just that's what the leap typically looks like.
Okay, so one more quick follow-up. Is there any other approach I should take and maybe ditch that? Do something else to get more books
You're asking
sold?
me a very difficult question. I mean, we met like 6 minutes ago, right? So I don't want to like try to give you any advice or guidance. I guess the first thing that I always default into is I think many times when people are trying and figure out like what is next for them is that they are oftentimes trying to think that there's something that would be easier. And so part of what I would say is like, I don't think that there are things that are easier or harder. They're all just different versions of fucking hard, right? Whenever you're trying to do something hard. So to me, if you've developed competency in those things behind it, my suggestion is the first step I would try is rather than trying to make it easier, try and find ways to make it more, what you're already doing, more sellable. So look at ways that you might do that one. So try things like, try to sort of sell products using ManyChat and Instagram. I don't know if I would launch a new product line. I would really try to make sure that you make first, is it just a sales problem you have first before you try to do something different? That's
Okay.
my 2 cents, but
Well,
yeah.
thanks.
Are there any other resources that you know of, Eric, that would help Sue or help any of us through that process? Any books that help kind of with that, or what would you suggest to how do we try to find that?
The best book that's out there for that one is right now Alex Hormozy's new book called $100 Million Offers. I would look at that. That is a really he has a series of them, $100 million leads, 100 million, but $100 million offers really talks about the business models of successful companies. I think that's what I'm gonna go back to one of the things Steve said before. We're all individual actors for the most part, right? Like trying to be individual peoples. And so part of it is like you wear all the hats. And so it's hard to be the sales hat and the delivery hat and all these things behind it. And so part of it is making sure that you don't lose sight of the business model from the fact of like, what are the logistics to make that business happen? And so I think to me, most likely, if I were diagnosing it, I would really try to get at and really try to break this down and say, like, what is my business model? What is my sales channel? How is it happening? And how do I basically focus versus add? Like what you're talking about is like, how can I add? And I would sort of say the first step usually in successful scaling is not to try and add something. Like an MBA came to me the other day. They're like, hey, one of my former students, business is going pretty well. We're thinking about doing something else new that's like a tangential thing to it. And I was like, well, why can't you like, have you tapped out on this existing thing? They're like, no. And I was like, well, why don't you like grow that thing? And they're like, well, because we just thought, I don't know. And I was like, just do the thing, grow the thing. You're close, right? You just got to do more of those things. But there's these natural stair steps and growth behind it. And so to me, the first and most logical thing was you've already got something. You've got fans, you've got people who love you. Think about, is there a way to scale your sales of that versus trying to unlock a whole new business model yet? That's hard. It's really fucking hard because you've got all these other variables, but it's like starting over. Right? Naveed started over. He stopped doing executive coaching and said, I'm going to do these things. And so for him, it was like a bit of a leap. I mean, it worked, but because he did it based on a partnership he had. But it's not easy. It's a little, it's one of those things that I usually say it's the second thing you do if that scaling of what you have doesn't work first.
Good stuff. We're almost at time, Eric. I put your LinkedIn in the chat again. Is there another way that you prefer people to connect with you or stay connected?
Whatever. Yeah. I mean, I'm easy to find. So no one can spell my last name. So easy to find. If you if you find me, I'm happy to connect with you. And like I said, I'm happy to be research. And again, Steve was super glad to come here. Hopefully this is helpful to people. But like I said, I do think that I love books personally, but I also will just to tell all the people here is like I think books are just a product, right? I think selling speeches, selling talks, all these things, there's a lot of stuff to do. So kudos to y'all for having a organization group to collaborate. I think my big philosophy in doing hard things, period, is if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. So kudos to Steve and all of y'all for having a community that goes far, because I think that's the biggest thing in success in any kind of endeavor today.
All right. Well, with that, great stuff, Eric. Seriously, thank you for the time. This is phenomenal. Everybody else, we're at time, so we'll probably just drop it off there. But yeah, reach out to me if you have any questions or if you can't find Eric, even though he's pretty easy to find. And Elizabeth, that's all your note about Monday. Yeah, let's figure it out. We'll figure out a time to connect there as well. All right. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.
Phenomenal.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.